Hello and welcome to the Office Field Guide. Today we are looking at The Branch Closing. This is the 35th of the 201 episodes of The Office, or the 7th of the 3rd season. Branch Wars was written by my personal favorite co-executive producer, Michael Schur, and it was directed by Tucker Gates, who, fun fact, not only directed a ton of shows like Homeland, Ray Donovan, and an episode or two of every show in the Schurverse, but also one of my personal favorite episodes of The Office, Threat Level Midnight. But this one aired on November 9th, 2006, and it was viewed by 8.1 million people. The setup for the branch closing is that Jan informs Michael that the Scranton branch is closing, and chaos ensues. And so your trivia for this episode is, how much money did Creed make by selling items from around the office? But with that, let's absorb this one.
No one asked you anything ever?
First, as this is his last episode in the series, let's say goodbye to Josh.
Josh?
Anyway, I watched this episode more than a few times for this review, and a few things stuck out to me. First, this episode is almost a full diversion away from the normal plot structure of The Office, in which there's a A plot, a B plot, and then often a very minor C plot. This episode is jam-packed with so many plot lines and small bits. From a writing perspective, this makes total sense, and I really like it. When something stable like our career is being ripped out from underneath us, it can feel chaotic. There's so much happening in this episode to give us that sense of chaos. But I think there's another thing at play here too. This episode aired with a 22-minute-ish time frame. But later, on the evening of its airing, a producer's cut was released on NBC.com. NBC execs touted that The Office was always at the front line of digital content, and they wanted to see how Office fans might consume this additional content on their website. Thus, a lot of things like the fleshing out of Creed's scam, the Ryan and Kelly bits, Dwight searching through the trash at David Wallace's house, and like 5 or 6 other things were added to the producer's cut of this episode. The producer's cut seems to be the most consistently available as it was added for the DVD, and it's what's streamed on Netflix. This episode is such a good sitcom episode. The situation, everyone's losing their job, and the comedy is in the behavior of the whole roster of characters. The other huge thing in this episode is that I adore every time Michael and Dwight are in the same scene together. It's amazing both for the comedy and its genuinely touching moments.
My first day when you hazed me by spraying me with a fire extinguisher. That was hilarious.
And special note, sorry if you're watching this in the distant future, but we're in the middle of the COVID pandemic in the States right now as I'm recording this. And I cannot unsee Dwight sharing his drink with Michael without cringing for a completely different reason than what was originally intended. For all of their shenanigans, nothing fills me with pure joy, bewilderment, and laughter than seeing Michael and Dwight celebrate their win. And then when the calm happens, Michael says,
Oh! Yeah, baby!
We did it!
Oh, man!
How did we do it?
I have no idea.
I don't understand.
But let's explore this more in the deeper meaning.
Why don't you explain this to me like I'm 5?
Okay, so I haven't done a versus thesis in a bit, and that's what I'm going for with the branch closing episode. Not only because it's Scranton versus Stamford, but because this episode explores the concept of relationships versus business. Think about that huge list of bits from this episode. Almost all of them have something to do with business versus relationships. Michael and Dwight are on a business quest to save Scranton with an emotional plea.
Do you know what you're gonna say when he shows up?
I will improvise. I will speak from the heart.
No. Bad idea. You need an attack plan.
Also, they end up deepening their friendship together in the process.
When you took me to the hospital and told me that you cared about me.
Ryan is going to break up with Kelly because it makes perfect business sense.
It just doesn't make sense. This kind of worked out perfectly for me.
But then they get back together for some sort of weird emotional reason. Creed is very illegally selling stuff from around the office because it makes perfect business sense to him. Interestingly, in a crossover business and relational concept, We see Meredith's quest to find who she made a deal to sleep with on her last day of work. Daryl can be confident because Bob Vance, a businessman, made a relational and probably financially motivated deal to keep those guys working. As soon as Michael brings up his relationship with Jan, she walks out because that topic isn't relevant.
Please do not do this to me. Don't hurt me like I hurt you.
It's shown that business is stopping Stanley from living his best life, and the same could be said about Toby.
But Costa Rica will still be there. When I'm 65.
But don't worry, Toby, Costa Rica isn't that far away for you.
I am moving to Costa Rica. I'm just gonna hop the fence and jog home now. Does anyone have a camera here?
I went ziplining my third day in Costa Rica. I guess the harness wasn't strapped in exactly right.
The topic of downsizing has been looming on the horizon since the pilot episode of The Office.
Either you or him to convince me that your branch could incorporate the other.
Okay, no problem.
This does, however, mean that there's going to be downsizing.
Me no want to hear that, Jan. Because downsizing is a bitch.
It's come up dozens of times over the last 2.5 seasons of the series, and every time it's meant to fill us with some sort of dread. One, because we don't want to see any of our beloved characters lose their job and thus leave the show. But two, we hope that the downsizing doesn't happen because we don't want to be downsized ourselves. But for all that dread, there is so much logical sense in what Dwight says here.
Okay, it's not a charity, it's a business. And it's a dying business. Look, the whole business model of the small regional paper company simply doesn't make sense anymore. Stop!
He's right. It's 2006. We're well into the internet age. Paper is no longer needed for business operations. Ecological thought is taking hold. And though it hasn't hit yet, a major recession was looming on the horizon. At the end of the day,
Dunder Mifflin, people versus paper people,
is a business. And its people, aka their employees, are just capital, resources that the company has. And while every company will say that its most valuable resource is the people, when a business is suffering, they have to make cuts to survive. In this, they're showing that sometimes businesses have to make decisions that are going to screw people over.
You expect to get screwed by your company, but you never expect to get screwed by your girlfriend.
On the other hand, making business-minded decisions is also shown in a negative light by the decision that Josh makes.
You leverage your new position with us into another offer? Damn it, Josh, this whole restructuring thing was based around keeping you.
I'm sorry, all right? It's done. It's done.
It makes perfect sense for his situation, but ultimately he's screwing over the company and a bunch of people who work for him in the Stamford office. Again, Josh is juxtaposed to Michael in this statement.
Say what you will about Michael Scott, but he would never do that.
Michael would never do that. But that statement's true in the same way that saying that this panda will never win first place in the Boston Marathon. One, because he's unlikely to have ever considered competing, and two, he's a tubby panda. No offense to tubby pandas in my audience. Michael wouldn't do this because it's outside his nature to even consider leaving Dunder Mifflin on his own ambition. It's just not going to happen. And while I don't think this episode makes a clear statement on whether business is evil or not, it is a great look at the American workplace culture, which is what this show is about. So maybe the message at the end of the day is that Michael won because business decisions without factoring human cost just doesn't make sense.
I don't understand.
The board voted last night to close your branch.
On whom's authority?
The board's.
Or maybe this whole episode exists to really show how dysfunctional the Ryan and Kelly relationship is.
Can't explain it.
But with that, let's dish out some Dundees.
then I gotta get him to the Dundees.
The Dundee for another set of gifts goes to Michael Scott.
All I can do right now is put on a brave face and go out there and be their leader.
It's over. We are screwed.
And
this is the worst.
And the Dundee for acting goes to Charles Chip Esten. It's gotta be hard coming on The Office and playing the straight man who's also kind of the antagonist to Michael Scott. But you could see it on Josh's face when he hears that the rumors of Scranton closing are out in the wild. It's because he has more information than everybody else. There's a lot going on in his performance here, and I just want to give the guy some props. But with that, let's get to the trivia and ratings.
What gives you the right?
All right, the trivia question for this episode was, how much money did Creed make off selling those items?
Hey, Creed. Congratulations.
Thank you. Made like $1,200.
$1,200. I am certain that's a felony. In the non-producer cut of this episode, the Creed bit was cut out, which makes this line funny with no context.
Hey, Pam, we're going to Port Richards. Creed's buying shots.
Okay, and for the cold opening, you guys know I'm a sucker for Jim Dwight pranks, and this one hits the nail on the head.
No! You'll thank me later.
I give it a 4 out of 5. I would have given it a 5 out of 5 if it would have used its time a little more efficiently and maybe showed a few different iterations of this prank. As the theme song hits, I wonder how that conversation between Dwight and Stanley would have gone when he tried to explain how he gets facts from the future. Anyway, as for this episode, man, on my first viewing, I can remember the uneasiness of the situation that they're facing. As I watched this through numerous rewatches and several times for this field guide, I've always gotten a little bugged with this episode. One, because of the plethora of just different bits that they threw into this episode, but also because it's the end of the Stamford arc, and the beginning of an arc of the season that I'm just not really a big fan of, which is the merger and the dwindling of the Stamford employees at Scranton. But if doing these field guides have taught me anything, it's that I need to give each episode its own focus. So all in all, I give this one a 4 out of 5. It was almost a 3 out of 5, but I bumped it up to 4 out of 5 because so many of the bits are just great. This episode does exactly what it needs to story-wise, and it's a great half an hour of television. Steve Carell acted the crap out of this one.
Sprouting up all over the place, ripe for the plucking. Show me that far.
But that's just what I think about the branch closing. What are your thoughts? What are your favorite bits from the vast array of bits in this one? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say. If you like this, we're reviewing an episode of The Office every week on this channel. Next week, we're going to be taking a look at The Merger, so come back for that one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Confidence. It's the food of the wise man, but the liquor of the fool.
I'm looking forward to getting to know you better, Vikram.